Look before you judge me. You need to understand what it's like living with someone who treats dusty old records like they're more sacred than your actual relationship. I'm Heather. I'm 29. And I just spent 2 years watching my boyfriend, Kevin, turn our spare bedroom into what he called his collection room, but what I called a museum to his refusal to grow up. And if you want to know how I feel about the whole thing, let me just say this. Sometimes people need a wake-up call, even if they don't appreciate it at the time. So please, if you don't mind, hit that like button and subscribe because I need all the support I can get right now. And let me tell you exactly what went down. Kevin's 32, works in cybersecurity, makes decent money, but you'd think those records were his actual children. The way he obsessed over them. Climate control, special shelving, humidity monitors. I'm not exaggerating. He spent more on that room than most people spend on their cars. And for what? So he could sit in there for hours handling these things with white gloves, like he's some kind of curator. It was pathetic, really. When I moved in 6 months ago, I thought it was just a hobby. You know, like how some guys collect sports cards or whatever. But this was different. This was an addiction. He had over 1-800 records and he knew every single one by heart. He'd tell me these long stories about where he found each one, what made it special, how much it was worth. Like I cared that some jazz album from the 1960s was an original Blue Note pressing, or whatever technical nonsense he'd ramble about. The worst part was how his whole face would light up when he talked about them. More excited than he ever got talking about us, about our future, about anything that actually mattered. And when I'd suggest maybe turning that room into something useful, like a home office for me or a guest room for when people visited, he'd get all defensive and territorial. This is useful, Heather. It's my collection. Useful for what? Impressing other middle-aged men who still think vinyl sounds better than digital. I tried to be supportive at first. Really, I did. I'd nod when he'd show me some rare, fine, pretend to care when he'd explain the difference between pressings and remasters. But after months of this, I started seeing it for what it really was. A grown man playing with expensive toys while ignoring his girlfriend's needs. The breaking point came when my friend visited and saw the record room. She just stared at all those shelves, all those albums lined up like soldiers and said, "Wow, it's like a museum in here." Kind of creepy, actually. And she was right. It was creepy. It was like living with someone who was more in love with objects than with the person sharing his bed. That's when I started really thinking about what this said about Kevin as a partner. Here's a guy who's supposedly ready for a serious relationship, but he's still clinging to this teenage obsession. He'd rather spend his weekends digging through dusty record stores than planning actual experiences we could share. He'd rather invest thousands in more albums than in our future together. And the money, don't even get me started. He'd casually mention dropping $500 on some rare pressing while I'm trying to budget for basic necessities. He had insurance on these things, for crying out loud. Insurance. Like they were valuable assets instead of outdated technology that nobody under 50 even uses anymore. I started dropping hints about how nice it would be to have that space for something we could both enjoy. Maybe a home gym or a cozy reading area, or even just storage for normal couple things. But Kevin would just change the subject or give me that patronizing smile like I didn't understand the cultural significance of his collection. The final straw was when he installed a lock on the door. A lock he said it was for security purposes because some of the records were irreplaceable. But what I heard was, these objects matter more to me than trusting my girlfriend. That's when I knew something had to change. So when Kevin told me he was flying out to some cybersecurity conference for 4 days, leaving me alone with his precious collection, I saw it as the universe giving me an opportunity. An opportunity to finally do what needed to be done. Help my boyfriend grow up and move on from this childish obsession. The morning Kevin left for his conference, I kissed him goodbye and waited exactly 30 minutes after his Uber pulled away before I started planning. I wasn't being malicious. I was being practical. We needed that space for something useful, and Kevin was never going to make that decision on his own. Sometimes you have to take charge in a relationship, right? I spent that first day researching how to organize a garage sale. I'd never done one before, but how hard could it be? I made signs posted on Facebook Marketplace, even put an ad on Craigslist. Vintage vinyl collection, I wrote, barely touched. Owner finally agreed to let them go. Which was technically true. He was going to agree once he saw how much better our home looked without all that clutter. The second day, I started moving everything out of the record room. Box after box after box. I had no idea there were so many until I started stacking them in the garage. Some were heavier than others, and a few had these weird protective sleeves, but mostly they just looked like old albums to me. Dusty, taking up space, serving no real purpose. I set up tables in the garage and started arranging everything. I figured I'd price them reasonably, maybe $2 or $3 each for the regular ones, $5 for the ones that looked older. I wanted them gone, not to make a fortune. The goal was decluttering, not profit. That's when my neighbor Landon came over. He's this older guy who's always been friendly, and he was staring at the records like he'd seen a ghost. "Heather, are you sure about this?" he asked, picking up one of the albums with shaking hands. "Some of these are really valuable." I laughed. "They're just old records, Landon. Kevin's finally ready to let them go and focus on our future together." But he kept looking through them, getting more and more agitated. "This Blue Note collection alone? Heather, you need to call Kevin." "Kevin's at his conference," I said firmly. "He trusts me to handle this. We discussed it." Which wasn't exactly a lie. We discussed the room needing to change, even if he hadn't agreed to the solution. When the garage sale officially started on Saturday morning, I was shocked by the turnout. Word had spread somehow, and there were people lined up before I even opened the garage door. Serious-looking men with magnifying glasses, examining every album like they were archaeological artifacts. One guy, Nicholas, seemed to know exactly what he was looking at. He went through everything systematically, making notes, asking questions about condition, and pressing details that I couldn't answer. Finally, he approached me with an offer. "I'll take everything," he said. "The whole collection. $500 cash right now. $500 for a bunch of old records." It seemed like a great deal to me. That was money Kevin and I could use for something practical, like new furniture for the living room, or a weekend getaway together. Real couple things instead of dusty collector nonsense. "Sold," I said, shaking his hand. Nicholas had a van and we loaded everything up. Box after box gone in less than an hour. I felt lighter already, imagining how surprised and grateful Kevin would be when he came home to a clean, organized house focused on our relationship instead of his obsession. I used the $500 to buy new living room furniture. 2 beautiful leather couches and a glass coffee table that would look so much more adult and sophisticated than Kevin's bachelor pad aesthetic. I even left him a note in the empty record room explaining how this was going to be so much better for both of us. How we could finally focus on building a life together instead of him hiding away with his collection. The house looked amazing, modern, clean, like a real couple lived there instead of a man-child and his long-suffering girlfriend. I couldn't wait for Kevin to see it. But when Kevin came home that night, his reaction wasn't what I expected. He went straight to the record room, and I heard this weird sound, like a wounded animal. Then he was in the living room staring at me with this expression I'd never seen before. "Where are my records?" His voice was quiet, controlled, which somehow made it scarier than if he'd been yelling. "They're gone," I said, gesturing to our beautiful new furniture. "Look how much better this looks. We can actually use this space now. You sold my property without permission." "Your property?" "We live together, Kevin. What's yours is mine, right? Besides, they were just taking up space we could use for something meaningful." That's when he told me how much they were worth. $150,000. I laughed because that was ridiculous. Nobody pays that much for old records. But Kevin wasn't laughing. He was on his phone, and I heard him talking to someone about filing a police report. "You're calling the police on me." I couldn't believe it. "I'm your girlfriend." "Ex-girlfriend," he said, not even looking at me. "You have 1 hour to pack and get out." I tried explaining that I was trying to help us help him grow up, help our relationship. But Kevin wouldn't listen. He actually called 911 when I started getting upset, claiming I was being violent just because I raised my voice and maybe threw a coffee mug. The police came and watched me pack, while Kevin stood there like I was some kind of criminal instead of someone who loved him enough to save him from his own immaturity. They treated me like I was the problem, not understanding that sometimes you have to make tough decisions for the people you care about. The next few weeks were a nightmare. Apparently, Kevin really did have insurance on those stupid records, and the insurance company paid him $145,000 for albums that were just sitting in a room collecting dust. It was insane. But that wasn't enough for Kevin. He pressed charges. Actual criminal charges, like I was some kind of thief instead of someone who was trying to improve our relationship. The police detective Morrison treated me like a common criminal, asking all these questions about malicious intent and premeditation. My parents tried to help. My dad even offered Kevin money to drop the charges, but Kevin refused. He said it wasn't about money anymore. He wanted me to have a criminal record so other people would know what I was capable of. Like I was dangerous instead of someone who made one mistake trying to help the person she loved. The worst part was how everyone turned against me. My job found out about the charges, and suddenly I was no longer a good fit for their company culture. My friends started avoiding my calls. Even my own mother started questioning my judgment, asking how I could have thought selling someone else's things was okay. I tried explaining it on social media, sharing my side of the story. I posted about how this was what late-stage capitalism does to relationships, how Kevin was so attached to material things that he was having me arrested over what was essentially a donation to charity. But people were brutal in the comments, calling me names, saying I was lucky Kevin didn't sue me for even more money. The legal process dragged on for months. Kevin got a lawyer, an actual lawyer, and refused every settlement offer. He wanted me convicted, wanted it on my permanent record. My lawyer kept telling me to take plea deals, but I couldn't understand why I should plead guilty to trying to help my relationship. Then I made the TikTok. I was frustrated, broke, facing prison time, and I just wanted people to understand my side. I explained how Kevin was a hoarder who cared more about moldy old records than his girlfriend, how I tried to help him by decluttering our space, how he was probably gay anyway since he seemed more interested in his collection than in me. The video went viral, but not in a good way. People were vicious, digging up information about the case, posting Kevin's insurance documentation, proving that the records really were worth what he said. Someone even found this Reddit thread Kevin had posted, telling his version of events, and suddenly everyone was an expert on why I was wrong. The prosecutor saw the video and immediately withdrew the plea deal. She clearly shows no remorse, he told my lawyer. We're going to trial. That's when everything fell apart. The trial was a joke. They had video evidence from Landon's security camera, my own note admitting I sold everything, and my TikTok, where I basically confessed to the whole thing. The jury took less than an hour to convict me. 3 years in prison. 3 years for trying to help my boyfriend grow up. The judge said I showed no remorse and had publicly mocked my victim. Victim like Kevin was some innocent party instead of a grown man who needed someone to save him from his own obsession. I've been in minimum security for 8 months now. My cellmate, when I told her my story expecting some sympathy, just stared at me and said, "Girl, you stole $150,000 worth of his stuff, and you're surprised you're here. I'm here for stealing $500 worth of groceries to feed my kids. You're exactly where you belong." Even here, surrounded by actual criminals, people think I'm the problem. They don't understand that I was trying to save my relationship, trying to help Kevin become the partner I needed him to be. Instead, he gets to play the victim, while I'm the one paying the price for caring too much. I heard through my parents that Kevin's rebuilt his collection, that he's dating someone new, some book collector, who apparently understands his obsession. They deserve each other honestly. Two people who care more about objects than real relationships. Sometimes I wonder if I should have just accepted Kevin the way he was, records and all. But then I remember how dismissive he was of my needs, how he chose those albums over our future together, and I know I was right to try changing things. Maybe I went about it the wrong way, but my heart was in the right place. The truth is, I'm not sorry for wanting better for us. I'm sorry it ended this way. Sorry. Kevin couldn't see that I was trying to help. Sorry that loving someone enough to push them toward growth is apparently a crime now. But I'm not sorry for believing that relationships should come before collections, that people should matter more than things. I'll be out in 10 more months if I keep my head down. And when I am, I'm going to find someone who appreciates a woman who cares enough to fight for their relationship, even when it's hard. Someone who doesn't need to hide behind hobbies and collections to feel important. Someone who puts love first, the way it should be. Kevin can keep his records and his new girlfriend and his insurance money. I'll find someone who values what really matters. Us, our future, our life together. Not some museum to the past that keeps you from moving forward. That's all that matters in the end.